Right, just as I'm about to start, my cat is about to launch himself onto my computer and smash everything. So if everything suddenly goes by, we'll start again. But thank you so much for everyone to join us today. And we've got a really important topic. We're going to be looking at, are we being pushed into World War III, and how getting us in that constant fear state, how they're controlling our mind, and how we can basically break free of this feeling of constant overwhelm, of constant stress. Pumpkin, you're being naughty. Um, that Brice, it's such an important one, isn't it? And for those of you that are new, Brice from Esoteric and Ant and I, we have these weekly coffee chats. We do 1 week on my channel, 1 week on Esoteric Atlanta, and we pick up things that are in the news at the moment that are really sort of fascinating us, or current events, or interesting topics that we think we can learn from, and we chat through with you, the audience, and we love your interaction below. But World War III is a real scenario at the moment. It's been talked about a lot, but things seem to be escalating, Brice.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just before I signed in, I sent you a link that I mean, everything's gonna Kash Patel just made 3 arrests in the United States for treason and espionage. So there's stuff happening everywhere. And it's funny, the Cassiopean readings had just said it's chaotic, but also can be thrilling,
Yeah.
you know? So I guess it depends on your perspective of what you're willing to look at and take in and how you respond to that. Whatever is going to happen, right? Like whatever karma is going to unfold, whether we like it or not. But it's how we respond to that is where the power lies, in my opinion.
Oh, that's such a good point, and I think it's something I really want to pick up on below. And we're talking to everyone in the audience here, so please do let us know. But it's so interesting, isn't it? One of the things that I've seen so much debate that I'd love your opinion on, Brice, is the recent last week. The interactions between JD Vance, Trump, and Zelensky in the White House. And it's amazing how, I suppose what made that quite interesting at the moment is it was all over mainstream and it was all over alternative media, but in different ways on the two. And we're probably, our audience are probably the ones that are keeping an eye on both sides of things. And I think with everything that's going on at the moment, the change of the administration in America, the mass arrests, our disastrous state of affairs over in the UK and in Europe, where we've got lots of leaders from Europe, the UK, that are looking to want to keep the war going and send troops to it, by all accounts. That's what they're saying publicly. It's overwhelming for people. And just to add to that, David Cohen, our lovely friend in Australia, he sent me something from a really good Australian channel this morning that I'll send you afterwards. And if anyone wants it, message me and I'll send it to them, about a really good Australian woman who'd done a breakdown that we're always talking in our channels, and most alternative media is about, if we're being distracted here, there's something going on there that we're not meant to be looking at. And this video is about Australians, and it's not just Australian citizens, it's anyone who's been living in Australia for 6 months or longer, that now they've changed the law completely behind the scenes without any Australian citizens knowing about it. That means that they've got national call up. So if they go to war, anyone between the ages of 18 and 60 can be conscripted in to fighting.
18 and 60.
60. So I'm not even safe. But no, in all, we jest, but I'd rather that I got called up than my children did. I mean, good luck to you if you call me up. They'll give me instructions and I'll be sitting there arguing about them because I'll have a better idea about how we should do it.
We'll be
Um,
frolicking through the woods of the Ukraine with the deer.
they'd literally send me back. They'd send me back for being too much effort, just like my teachers used to send me to the back of the class for being too annoying. If I got conscripted, they'd definitely send me back. But no, I'm laughing because you have to laugh about these things that are so hideous. So, Brice, what do you think about all these things in the news from whatever channel you're looking at? It's pretty overwhelming at the moment. And I don't know about you, but I've had so many people message me saying, oh my God, the energy is just all over the place at the
Yeah.
moment. It's horrendous.
We even have that, I've been feeling it. It's so funny. I said this on my last episode, that little song from Mary Poppins where he goes, the wind's in the east, something's brewing, we feel it. And even at our yoga shala, Todd was saying that students are coming in being like, something feels weird,
Yeah.
something feels weird. And the thing is, of course, everybody knows me, knows I go off the law of one, because that makes the most sense to me. Like that just is practical. It's dark and light polarity. There are rules. We see it for what it is. And the first thing I want to say about the whole Ukraine, Trump, Zelensky, all that stuff in World War III is, I think, first of all, as human beings who practice discernment, we have to realize that not one person on this planet is all bad or all good.
Yep.
And so, like, to graduate in this law of one, to graduate, they call it harvesting, which, harvesting sounds like a Stephen King term.
Yeah.
But maybe that's what we deserve here. But I'm sorry, my computer is spinning right now. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you, but sorry, I've got a delivery driver, so all the neighborhood's dogs are just going mad, so ignore
Oh no, it's fine. It's just okay, as long as you guys can still see
Yeah,
me.
I can hear you.
If you're looking off weird, it's because my little mouse thing is spinning right now. Oh, there it just released. Oh, and it just froze again. Okay. So maybe they don't like us talking about this, Catherine.
Oh, we've had this a lot, and in all seriousness, I know, just a quick diversion. It is very true. People are being listened to.
Yes,
I made a joke in
absolutely.
my WhatsApp group because we've got a group WhatsApp group, and someone had a notification saying he'd left the group, and he hadn't. But at the same time, he'd put a message about how he'd left the country, and I was like, "You're just all being spied on." It's
Yeah,
all,
and the
and it's
Cassiopeians
true.
have said that. The last reading of the Cassiopeians, guys, they said that the OPs, organic portals, they're going to start kind of coming around us and trying. So I'm just going to sage. So if you see me looking
Under my
weird,
arms, please.
if you see it like me looking off, it's because my computer just froze, so I don't know where to look. So anyway, but yeah, so not every person is all bad and all good. To graduate service or harvest service to others, you have to be 51% service to others. So 49% of you can be I know, right? That's a relief to me. Like, right?
Yeah.
Like we don't have to be perfect all the time. So even though the Cassiopeians have said Mr. T is good, his intentions are good, doesn't mean that he's not going to mess up from time to time.
Yeah.
If for anybody out there, as long as and the law of one says it's your intentions that count, like what are your intentions behind your actions? Now, with that being said, it's so fascinating you asked me this, Catherine, because with the draft, as we call it, the draft in the United States, we got letters. Our kids, not me, I'm 42, but looks like if it's the same rules, I would also be, potentially taken. So my boyfriend's in his 50s, him too, but and we only drafted when the draft was available, it was only for boys, and it still was only boys that got the letter, not girls. I'm not really, I'm very into patriotism, but I'm not really one for the draft because I don't think you should force somebody to do something. They should want, I respect our military. I respect the British military because I know we're great allies. We support each other. The men and the women who sign up to do that voluntarily, thank you for defending both of our countries. But you signed up voluntarily. You shouldn't force somebody to do something, especially like that could literally kill them. Now, here's the thing. So this is what we were hearing because Trump said no more to Zelensky and sent him packing. And I know he got on a plane and flew right to Downing Street right after, like a little baby crying to run daddy to help. We have a problem now. And this is because of, and I don't know if I should say this word, NATO. NATO. I don't know if we can say that, but you guys know what it is. And I was talking to a student. I have a student here in Atlanta who's an immigrant he's from Haiti. He's been a US citizen for over 40 years now. Huge supporter of Mr. T. We were talking about it after class, and I said my opinion at that moment was like, I think America should pull itself out of NATO. Because basically what we were hearing was that Zelensky was going to order NATO to draft American kids anyway, because NATO would then supersede the president, which is going against the will of the people, the United States, because the people voted Mr. T there. I know most people in America, I think in most countries, most people don't want war. Like, we're learning that, right? Most people do not want this at all.
Only a psychopath would want it, because anyone who's got loved ones that are going to be involved, it's just, as you say, there's some incredibly brave servicemen and women that are amazing. And, you know, to have that sort of personality, bravery, courage, resilience, and everything, we all need that. But if no soldier wants to be fighting next to someone that's been drafted in, because if
Exactly.
you're on the battlefield and whatever that might look like, you need people that you know have got your back. You need your wingman. And if your wingman's been drafted in or woman and doesn't want to be there, then you're not going to be able to rely on them. So it's a disaster all round.
And this even comes down to one of my favorite TV shows as of late is Special Forces, where they take celebrities and they give them like military. I would love to do it because it's like ultimate shadow work. But they have the people who run it are British and American
Mm.
military. Because
Yeah,
that's like, because whenever United States and the UK, apart from NATO, have the strongest alliance. If
hmm,
England goes to war, America goes. Vice versa. Our men and women are in the trenches together, shoulder to shoulder, side by side. It's not like you have a British troop here and an American. They're together,
yeah,
protecting each other. And I watch this special. I watch these guys, Americans and Brits, who have been together on the trust that it goes beyond just allegiance to country. It's utter trust that they trust each other with their lives, and we see that from people who return from the service. Their brothers in arms are like,
yeah,
sometimes that bond is bigger than family for them. And so you're right. We need people who want that, because otherwise it's one bad apple is going to spoil the whole bunch, you know?
yeah,
And you're only as strong as your weakest player. You're only as strong as your weakest person. So but with the NATO situation, my Haitian student had a unique perspective because he's a huge Republican. He's a black guy, loves, we talked a lot about that too, about the stereotypes and how he shocks people all the time. But he said, I don't think America should pull out of NATO because we need to keep our friends close, but our enemies closer. And we don't want all of Europe to invade the United States because the United States pulled out. But what's interesting with that, Catherine, is I think this actually has to do with a lot of the number of the human population. Obviously, if you have a bigger country, you're going to
yeah.
get more taxes and stuff to pay for stuff. I watched a British military man the other day pleading on TikTok. I wish I had saved this TikTok for the UK powers that be to pull the UK as well, because if they don't have the backing from the Americans, the UK doesn't have the number of equipment needed that the
Yeah,
Americans have the equipment, and that would just be a slaughter And so it's interesting. So I'm seeing these different, and every single perspective makes sense to me,
yeah.
even if some are opposing each other. But I'm not a genius when it comes to war. Like, that's not, even when I do my history deep dives, I'm like, this is war history kind of bores me anyway. So, and I don't know, there's so much like what we see on the surface versus what's happening underneath the surface. There's so much we're not even privy to as the general
Oh,
public.
completely. Yeah,
So I don't
completely.
know what the answer is with, like, I know that with Crimea, I know that Ukraine is in the wrong with Crimea, because with the USSR disintegrated
Mm.
and Crimea became an autonomous sovereign nation, the rule was if they wanted to default and give up their sovereign state, they would return back to Russia, which
Mm.
is what happened. Which is what happened. And as one guy said on TikTok, them's the rules. That's just the rules they set. And so when that happened, and then Ukraine wanted Crimea, but that was not the agreement that was made back in 1989. So it's depending on how whatever you feel about the Ukraine or Russia, the rule was, so actually Ukraine was in the wrong because of the rules.
Yeah.
But is there more there? I don't know. That whole area with Crimea and Russia has always, throughout history, when I did my deep dive into the Romanovs, there was always something going on with Crimea. So this has been an area for a long time that has held a lot of friction and a lot of tension. And they say that the truth has three sides: this side, that side, and in the middle, which is usually the truth.
Mm. And
So,
boundary issues and war issues, it's not just a human thing. I mean,
no,
every animal in nature, you know, if you've got two wolf packs, they will have boundary issues and they will fight because it's resources. And this is
yeah,
what it's like. You know, this is always going to be a place of conflict because unfortunately, when you've got the mentality that resources are limited and when we're living the life that we are at the moment, I don't know what my cat's doing. He doesn't want to be involved in this conversation. He's now gone right up on top of the wardrobe. You know, this is the problem. And that brings me on to my next point that I really wanted to ask you about and get the viewers' opinions on. So we've got all this stuff, and most of us listening on this will have different perspectives, but the one thing we won't have ever is the full picture. And I don't think the trouble is any of our politicians have, because yes, everyone thinks of like the cabal or the, you know, deep state, whatever you want to call it, as being one group, but there's not. There's so many factions of it. It's like when you take the mafia, there's loads of different factions of any of these organized crime groups, which is what I consider politics to be now.
100%.
Look at what you and I have talked a lot with really great guests on our platform about the science of mind control and how this high stress manipulation is the perfect way to control people. Because let's face it, if we all think we're going to be drawn into World War III, then if they suddenly put our taxes up or steal our farmland, which is happening big time over here, whatever, people are almost like they'll let that pass because it's not as bad as what this other option was.
Right. It's exploitation and entrapment and extortion. You're being extorted. And the thing is, and this is what, you know, again, the Cassiopeans always say the biggest defense is knowledge.
Yeah.
Because knowledge protects, knowledge is power, and knowledge is infinite. Now, with that being said, we don't have the full picture, and we probably never will. And I agree with you. There's not one team of good guys and one team of bad guys. There are fractions everywhere. And then there's this other group, the gray hats.
Yeah.
And Catherine, I think you and I are the only people that have ever mentioned the gray hats. It's not, there's a group of people that will swing both ways.
And they're absolutely crucial. They're absolutely crucial. Not just when you're talking about the physical actions and how manipulable they are, how bribable, how blackmailable, whatever, you know, tool you want to put in there, but also the energy that they carry with it. And that we've seen, and this is why you and I did that whole series on traitors, is we've seen how everyone's got different boundaries, everyone's got their different price that they'll fall for, and everyone's got different ways of getting perhaps a bad job done, so to speak.
Yes.
No, so
we all think we're right when we're all so wrong. That is the biggest lesson we take away from and that it's so funny because I was just talking about the Wendy Savino case yesterday, and with the mafia families of New York, the 5 big mafia families, you guys know the Gambit, like the big ones they make movies about. There were certain rules that and of course, mafia is not big in the South. So this is most people from New York pipe in New Yorkers, because this is a part of y'all's history. And so I'd love to hear your perspective. With the 5 big mafia families, there were, as I hold up 10 fingers, they're the 5 big mafia families. As
he's manipulating us. This is mind control in action. Yeah.
They had certain rules that they followed, rules of conduct, rules of war. And I've always stated I'd rather leave my child with a mafia family member than a gang member, because they are very respectful to women and children for the most part. They only go after people they've done deals with. However, when there was something they needed done that went beyond their boundaries, there was a 6th gang called the Purple Gang. And this was the Harlem-based gang that would go in and do the dirty work for the mafia families. And we see this everywhere. It's in politics too. And the funny thing is what the Cassiopeans keep reminding us is the people that we call elites, the people we call the cabal, they are they're not the ones in charge. They're not actually who we're fighting. We're not actually fighting Zelensky. We're not actually fighting Biden. They're just puppets.
Yeah.
That's where the mystery comes too, is that there is a whole group of people. I'm not talking about aliens and demons, of human beings that we know nothing about, that are pulling the strings and manipulating everything. And I think just knowing that, Catherine, being aware of that, is where we start to create power as well. Even though we don't have the full story, just by knowing it's not the full story gives us more discernment, so we're not so reactionary to what's being told to us, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. And I think when you're one of the greatest realizations that I've had over the last 5 years, since we've been talking about this so much in so many different avenues into it, because everything is connected to everything else, is that a lot of this is about getting really good about being objective, keeping open-minded, and getting really good at asking questions. So rather than, jumping to the usual human reaction of who's right and who's wrong, it's like, why are they choosing to show us this?
Yeah.
Why is this happening? Because you're not going to know necessarily. I mean, someone in my position, I'm never going to know the answer.
Yeah.
However, what I can do, like someone like David Icke talks about, is the more you understand about the direction you're trying to get you in, the more you can see the coercion that's being used. And I think, with our conversations with Jamie Mustard that we've both spoken to, and Kathy O'Brien, and the Scientology stuff that we've done, and the Nexium stuff we've done, I think the reason it's so fascinating to me is you get that aha moment about everyone thinks that they're the one that can't be fooled. We saw it in Traitors, which is
Yep.
just trash TV. But there's lessons in all of this. It's all a reflection of life. We all think, as you say, that we're right. We all think that we're seeing the perspective. We all think we know the truth, whatever that might be. And once you relax into thinking, I don't know what the answer is, but I've got a pretty good idea of the clues to start looking to that are going to be red flags to me to either do not go in that direction blindly, or also to sort of say, I'm recognizing that I'm going into a fear state, which I can go into quite easily.
Right.
I'm a naturally quite a warrior personality. That's why I've always been so great when in my corporate jobs, when I was a risk manager, perfect. I can look at every possible scenario and come up for
Power.
contingency plans for it. I'm the best risk manager you can ever have. But that doesn't make for good. That's why I do so much, Brice, about stress management and cortisol,
Yeah.
because had to learn so much about it because of my natural tendencies and also my upbringing. So I think when people are watching this and they're like getting very embroiled, there's that fine balance, isn't there, of keeping yourself well enough informed, because one, it's interesting. That's why trash TV, that's why reality TV is so popular, because as human nature, we want some light distractions. These are heavy distractions. So this comes back to the stuff that you and I do so much of, and so many of our listeners are into, is okay, when you're just having so much overwhelm and trauma and potential futures that you're not wanting to happen for you and your loved ones, what can you actually do to shift your energy, shift your consciousness so it doesn't take you down emotionally and physically?
Well, I think not. As you're saying that, I keep thinking of the word hubris. Like so many people have hubris where they think they're so right and they start to, and we see that in the truth world, where people start to identify their opinions and their beliefs in the moment with who they are as people. And I think if we get rid of the hubris and we just wake up every day knowing that I don't know everything, I don't know everything, and I have to allow for human error. I have to allow that even for the people I'll speak to the Americans. I obviously, as most of America, voted for TNV, we'll say. That's who I
Mm.
voted for. I think anybody watching, even if you're not America, probably would have made that selection too, right? Because that's the information we have at the moment. That's the best intention for our country. Now, with that being said, TNV are not, they're humans.
Yeah.
There's going to be error. So even though even the Cassiopeians say their intention is really good, we can't put them on a pedestal where there's no way to, and my camera's slowing. They do not want
It
to talk
is.
about
Yeah,
it.
they really don't, because you are going in and out a bit. We can still hear you, but
Okay, good.
it's like your picture's a little bit frozen compared to the the audio isn't quite matching up with the video.
Okay, you guys, they really don't want us bringing common sense, which is really all we're doing, Catherine, right? Is just speaking some common sense.
But the biggest censorship that both of us have experienced, and not just us, all the things, as soon as you start talking about natural health, solutions to take your power back and manage your energy and stress levels, that is what gets censored more than anything else, because that's what they don't want us doing. And this is why discussions topics like this are so important, because it is very easy to go into that state of overwhelm. It's very easy to go into the fear state. It's very easy to go into the feeling of like nothing can do to make a difference. And that's exactly where they want us.
Absolutely. And that's why you and I, frankly, Catherine, that's why you and I are so shadow banned.
Yeah.
And because we it's common sense. And when we take our power back, a lot of common sense is understanding your triggers, understanding your anxiety, knowing you're being messed with intentionally. You know, we talk about everything. I mean, I'm glad that Kash Patel made these arrests. I think they're the first arrests of many to come. I really like Kash Patel. I think he's really, out of everyone, I feel like he's the one that's really got
Yeah.
lots of good intention. There's no suspicion around him. So, but with all these arrests, and I think I'm coming in and out again, guys. Sorry if you have to just not watch the screen because of just listen. Where's the Epstein list?
Yeah.
I'm glad the arrest happened. Two things can be true, right? We need these arrests. We also need that damn list. Where is it?
This is where so many of us, that's such a good point. And I've gone backwards and forwards and continue to go backwards and forwards on my views on this. As I find more information, my view shifts. And for me, that's the way it should do. It's not about the grey hats, as we talk, that can be influenced and bought and sold to, directed where they're needed. This is about the fact, oh, I hadn't thought of that perspective. So I've heard some really good interviews recently where they're sort of coming up with scenarios for why have they not released it. And it's not necessarily just the obvious of like there's people still in power that are on that list. It's also in terms of, right, okay, what is the bigger picture here? It is literally, I hate the 3D chessboard move, but any game, whether you've got a sports game, whether you've got investments, whether you're running a business, it's all about tactical decisions. And certainly it is about war. War is more about tactics and intelligence than it is about physical power most of the time. And the thing is about these things like the Epstein list, you can be very gung-ho and give the public what they want to hear, but then you're like, okay, what are the consequences of this? Because if this means, for example, that everyone's thinking about which well-known public figures are on that list, but what about the big financiers? What about the big money people, which could then suddenly stop the administration doing what they need to do to sort this mess out? So it's very, very complex. And if you're in that power, just like if you're a parent, you often have to make tough decisions. And you can't necessarily appease the masses if it's going to be of detriment to the masses, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. And that's the thing too. I mean, my boyfriend keeps wanting the truth of, we'll say the first month of the year, the sixth day of the first month of the year, because I don't want to come out. And I said to him, I was like, I think the truth is already out. I think that's the thing, is that most people know the truth of what happened on that day. Same with Epstein. I think most people are aware of who potentially is on that list. And so that shift in consciousness has already started. I'll go back to it. I personally don't, and this is not me, it's also coming from the Cassiopeians. There's certain events that we're going to have to go through. There's just certain stuff karmically that's going to have to happen. And it might not be comfortable, but our souls knew that when we took these incarnations, and we can't leapfrog to the end. Like we have to really like when you are re-renovating your house and you want to put up wallpaper or something. I know wallpaper went out of vogue, but I think it's coming in vogue. I don't know. You have to set the wall. You have to clean everything off. You have to make sure you can't just slap it up.
Yeah.
Because the problems that were there first are going to start to seep through the wallpaper anyway. And so I think too, I mean, I personally, and I'm going to shout this out. I mean, I know our audience, we have the best audience, and I know they're super balanced people anyway. They're like you said, they're watching both sides to try to
Mm.
figure out the truth. And that's why I love our audience. But I'm especially going to speak to the Americans because I know what's happening in Europe. We see stuff about people in England with their freedom of speech being totally even more attacked than the way ours have been. For me personally, I'm just grateful to live in the United States right now because I think we do have more flexibility than people in Europe. And so I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful to have that opportunity. Whereas I worry about people like Catherine because there's nothing we Americans can do and what's going on, but everything that's happening has to happen and play out the way it. And my boyfriend's good about that. He'll say we got to let things play out. We just got to let them see. We got to see because we don't, if we're, here's a good example. My teacher in India passed away a few months back. He's the Parm guru of the lineage. Meanwhile, his mother is still alive. Well, all these people, I made a video about it, but meanwhile, another woman, another authorized teacher wrote a blog about it because she was just in India. It's a shit show right now. Everybody, all these big teachers are trying to take over now.
Mm.
And it's just chaotic mess. It's a chaotic mess. And I said, my boyfriend wants to make a post because of Saraswati. The mother is still alive. So what do you mean you're trying to hold the lineage? Saraswati is still alive. And I was all gung-ho, reactionary, pissed off, like, yeah, you should post this morning, blah, blah, blah. He goes, well, wait a minute. I need to go listen to these other teachers' podcasts to make sure they didn't say Sarah. I don't need to jump to conclusions. And he reminds me of that. So I think sometimes when we, and it does go back to that PTSD thing, when we've been triggered so much before, we're immediately reactionary when we have to pull back and wait and see how things play off. And in the
Yeah.
meantime, be grateful for what we do have. I'm telling you one thing, and this goes out to all the Europeans, the Americans, the Canadians, the Australians. If you live in a damn first world country going through this, we are so much luckier than the people that live in developing countries going through this. Because we can go through this with relative comfort.
There's so many points you made there that I think are really important. First and foremost, about the lack of free speech in Europe and the UK. It's interesting because yes and no. So it's so interesting. I've got a second cousin in Australia who's amazing and right on our wavelengths. Hello to you. I won't say your name because you haven't given me permission, but she's absolutely brilliant. And she sends me loads of stuff about what's been reported that's going on in the UK from an Australian point of view. And I'm like, this is absolutely rubbish. None of this is true. Now, I'm not saying I've got intimate knowledge of everything that's happening in every little town in the UK, but in general, it's not true. So yes, have there been examples where they've made very public examples of people being put in, but the vast majority of people are still finding out exactly, they're still saying exactly what they want and getting away with it. And then we've got what you were just talking about in the first month of the year and the sixth day of the first year. So we look at that and we're sort of saying, thank God we're not living in America. This is absolutely ridiculous. They're putting people in jail. They haven't had a fair trial. They haven't been doing this. So I think, again, I'm such a broken record, but both things are true. So yes, we've definitely got problems with freedom of speech. I'm not denying that at all. But equally, they're deliberately taking a handful of cases and publicising them worldwide. And then you've got people like Tucker Carlson saying, oh my God, England's in a mess. Well, I live in England and there's bits that are not great at all, but there's so much that is so much better here than anywhere else I've been to. So I think we're all being manipulated again. I really think we're all being manipulated. And of course, me living in the leafy suburbs in the UK is very different to say if I'm living in one of the towns where they've just set up a mass immigration camp.
Right.
They're going to be under completely different pressures. Like I would imagine living where you are in Atlanta is very different to if you were living on the border with Mexico.
Well, even look in 2020, I've said this today. I'm so grateful I live in Georgia because my governor did not impose the same regulations that like New York did or California did. And so, it is, but then somebody in California or in New York might have, I don't know. It's
frightening, isn't it? How much we would be able to be manipulated. And I think for me, and I don't always get this right at all, Brice, and everyone listening, I really don't get this right. Probably depends what mood you catch me in and what day. But I'm trying to think, oh, okay. So they're trying to focus and publicising widely. Like for me, as a British person, it makes me really cross when I hear Tucker Carlson talk about England because I'm like, you don't know shit about. You've been here, you come here from your trips, you go to certain places, but you're not seeing. And of course, there's poverty here. Of course, our cost of living has gone up a lot. We have got a lot of issues that we didn't have 20 years ago, but we've also compared to so many places, got so much to be grateful
Yeah.
for. Our National Health Service, it's really good. If you get run over by a bus might not be the best example, you'll probably be splattered, but run over by a moped, we're really lucky that we've got free healthcare accessible to anyone. If you're having cancer treatment, are they going to push you down a certain direction? Absolutely, yes. There's pros and cons of everything, but I am sort of thinking, oh, is all of this on the alternative media and the mainstream media? It's very focused on us all seeing what's wrong. It's never focused on us seeing what's right and putting our attention on what's right and how we can build on that.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It's a lot of the alternative media is nothing but fear mongering anyway, and
Massively.
drama. It's just there's no some of these truther channels are no different than just a drama channel. It's just
Hmm.
gossip, 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 gossip. You know, with the we were talking about the Brigitte Macron situation that Candace Owens talked about. The Cassiopeans confirmed that Brigitte Macron is Jean-Michel Tragno, her actual brother took the identity. We don't know where the real Brigitte is, the baby
Hmm.
girl. And they wouldn't answer that. They would Cassiopeans wouldn't answer that. And I think, and there's many reasons why sometimes they don't answer questions, but it kind of goes back like with Brigitte Macron. The whole transgender issue is really not the issue of the
Yeah.
story. That's just a part of it. And that's the thing with all these like truther channels. Like when Candace Owens did her deep dive, that was just a small part of it.
Yeah.
There was so much more she exposed about the deception, the deceit. I think I froze again. Sorry, guys. They don't like us talking about this, Catherine. Um, um, but with other, I stick at all these other truther channels, and all it is trying to figure out who's a girl and who's not a girl. And I'm like, but what does that even matter to you? It
Yeah.
doesn't affecting you. And this is what they're doing. They're trying to distract you to bring you into this junk conspiracies. We're all just getting distracted. Is there stuff going on in the world? Yes. Does one sole person have all the answers? No, we don't. And so we have to, when we get more information, we course correct. That's what I was saying about the hubris. I would challenge people not to even identify with being awake.
Yeah.
Because when you start to identify with being awake, you stop seeing where you're still asleep. And then
Hmm.
there's a problem. To have discernment, to start to identify with who you are as a souled person in your sense of self or apart from everything else, and then take each day one step at a time. There's certain events that we're not going to be able to stop because karmically, and the Cassiopeans talk about that, we have karma to pay back from Atlantis.
Oh
From the
yeah, and it's really funny because I've always remembered when I was at Atlantis, and everyone apart from perhaps this audience, that all my friends in real life and family just laugh and just say, "Don't be so ridiculous. Atlantis didn't exist." But I can remember being there, and I can
yeah,
remember being there long before I knew ever anything about Atlantis. So, and of course, I can't prove that, but I love this. I love the discussions, and I love, for me, having a discussions in this way, Bryce. It takes the fear away. If I'm getting over anxious, because I've got two children in their twenties, early twenties. They're going to be the first generation. They're going to be the main area that are called up if they do conscription. I'm not going to pretend as a mum that that doesn't get me into a fear state sometimes. And they're adults, so whatever I want them to do, if they might volunteer for all I know, do you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, it's
um,
their karmic
they're
choice.
adults that they need to be able to do and make their own choices in life now, much as I might not like it. Mind you, most of the time they make a lot better choices than I do. So I'll have to give them that. But this is the thing, is we've all got our weaknesses. Whereas that my husband doesn't worry about that at all.
Yeah.
He doesn't. So we've all got our own little biases of things that will trip us over the edge to a fear state. For me, food safety is a huge one because I've got a lot of rescue animals to feed.
Yeah.
And the thought of not being able to feed them good quality food, the thought of feeding them genetically modified food that's been jabbed with God knows what terrifies me. whereas most people don't even think of that.
Right,
You know,
right.
we've all got our little nuances of areas that really tip us over into a fear state. But the great thing is, which we talk about so much and our listeners and guests talk about so much, is having those tools in your toolkit so that you can actually recognize it and do something about it, which is why I love your Esoteric Academy so much, because you know you've got so many different tools with the work that you and Paula have done there to give people the tools, as have I on my Catherine Edwards Academy. And it's not a sales pitch, guys. It's just saying, look, each and every one of us has to have those tools in our toolkit that we can pull in as and when. We should be having daily practices, but also when it gets very, very overwhelming, you up it. You really go to those tools that you know work for you and keep you physically, emotionally, and spiritually balanced.
Yeah, we have to get out of the imagination, the disassociation. We do have, I think it's hysterical because I think most of us in the spiritual world absolutely know Atlantis happened. Like it
Yeah,
happened. It was there's our history's wrong. There's so many different other civilizations that have been here. They even asked in one of the Cassiopeian readings, was Atlantis or Lemuria the oldest known civilizations? And they laughed and they're like, not by a long shot that have been on there. There's some stuff that we haven't even discovered yet of
yeah,
civilizations. And I think the Atlantis thing though is interesting because I think a lot of us have subconscious memories of Atlantis because it wasn't that long ago, really. And that is what we are mirroring. Of course, take this with a grain of salt too, but from what I understand, we are mirroring exactly what happened in Atlantis. And so
absolutely.
there are things that we didn't learn that lesson the first time. So we got to go back. And there are just certain things that even though we think we're not consenting to, there's a karmic balance that has to happen to even the scales. And so, and I will say, like the Cassiopeans, they're funny. They're kind of funny sometimes. They have these little like English little sayings that they picked up and they use a lot, like apples and oranges. They say that a lot. Apples and oranges when people are trying to compare. But
Yeah,
they also say like they switch between calling this time chaotic and calling it thrilling,
yeah.
which to me, thrilling is another way of looking at chaotic. Like, shit's gonna happen. Like, there's stuff that is going to happen that is just karmically supposed to happen. And how we experience it, how we train ourselves to not catastrophe think, because I'm really bad at catastrophe thinking. Like, I'm bad at leaving Ravi alone here. Like, he only
Yeah.
stays here by himself like twice a week for like an hour. And I am like in my head, I'm like, is the straightener still on? Like I am
That's
like,
exactly like me. I even phone up my neighbour and say, "Oh, can you just go and check?" Because my cats are okay, because my cats can get out the cat flap whenever they
yeah,
want. My dogs can't. And my poor neighbours, but then they do it to me. They'll phone me up and say, "Oh, go and check the irons off, please." Because
I
when
know. I would be
but I just
terrified.
want to pick up on something you said that. I think it's so important with the apples and oranges and the catastrophe thinking, because when I'm working with, I do a lot of work with clients for themselves and their animals on stress management, because that's been my weakness. And when you work on your weaknesses, you develop skills that you can help other people with. And so I've got a twin sister and we're completely different personality wise. And if you would say to my sister, look, we're going to take you to a theme park with huge roller coasters, she'd be like, fantastic. And I'd be like, no way, I hate roller coasters, they're really scary. But when you look at the physiology of excitement and fear, the physiological reactions in your body are exactly the same. And I won't bore you because I think most of the listeners know it. But you know, if my sister, I won't mention her name, I nearly mentioned it. If she was in the queue and you were saying, right, how are you feeling? She'd be saying, oh, my heart's racing a bit, my hands are a bit sweaty, my breathing, I just can't wait to get on it. And if you ask me how you're feeling, I'd be like, I'm terrified, don't make me go on it. My heart's going, my breathing's going, my phone, exactly the same symptoms, but I've labeled it, and my subconscious and conscious mind has labeled it as fear. Hers is labeled as it as excitement. And this is what we can do with all these things that are going on now. Some things we've got say over, some things we haven't. It's not that we're saying that we're all poor little helpless beings that are just waiting to be manipulated, the masters. No, 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 we're not saying that. But what we can control is our response to them. And that response will feed the energy back into the collective consciousness that will then change the outcome often.
Oh yeah, it's like we're on that roller coaster right now. We're on it. We can't get off of it. So you can
Yeah,
either throw your hands up in the air and have so much fun, or you can hunker down and
yeah.
squeeze and cry and make that decision for yourself. It's whatever's going to happen is going to happen. We also have individual karma. We can't interrupt other people's karma. There is so much at play here. Even when you look at the Cassiopeians, when they ask about certain events, they say, we can't tell you now because there's certain variables that have to play out, and it's human consciousness and human choice. And so for me, it's like, as you're saying that, I'm like, at least, I mean, in some ways, I'm like, damn, I'm not really having the life my ancestors, recent ancestors had, like of get married, have kids, you go into retirement, it's all good, peaceful existence. But then it's like, but also, okay, cool, I don't have that same, we collectively don't, or we're not going to have that same outcome.
Nope.
So what? And sometimes the unknown is what scares people. Like the devil I know is better than the devil I don't know. So I think a lot of times people get scared because of the uncertainty of what this thrilling, chaotic, but we already know the alternative. So maybe there's
Yeah.
something better. And that's what the Cassiopeians are so funny, Catherine, because when Laura gets all stressed about things going on and she's asking, and they're like, why are you stressing? The end is going to be fabulous. They're like, just got to get through this. You just got to, it's like having a baby. You just got to push it out. And then you got this beautiful child. Like, you just gotta ride through it. It's like taking a long, in the United States, I know in England they make fun of us sometimes because we'll no problem drive 10 hours to get to a destination because our
Yeah.
country's so big. And trust me, that 10-hour road trip sometimes is brutal. But getting to the destination, you got to go through the journey to get to that destination. And so, it's having that, keeping your guard up every day, making choices that you feel like are the best for you, your family, and your community. Listening to I just watched a TikTok today about people saying if you are a conservative, maybe it's time to start listening to some liberal podcasts. If you're a liberal,
Oh,
maybe it's
yeah.
start listening to some curve, so you have both perspectives constantly. Constantly have both perspectives, listening to alternative media and mainstream media.
And
You need,
listening, not with, like so many of us do, not listening with how can you criticize and jump in and say, I don't agree with that, I don't agree with that. Listening with a room to say, I just wonder if there's something that I can gain from this. I wonder if there's something here I haven't thought of, a new perspective that will make me a better, more compassionate person.
yeah,
One thing I want to ask you about, I really want to ask you about this, Brice, before we finish. There's a lot of our audiences are like us. They're very compassionate people. They're very empathic people. And we can have conversations like this, and then we can be like, oh my God, but what about all the people in Gaza? What about all the people in the Ukraine, in Russia, in Israel, both sides? Because,
yeah,
it's never the people, it's
right.
always small factions of it. And it's really, really hard for a lot of people when there's so much suffering going on and actually you're generally okay. What have you learned from your learnings and your spiritual teachings and your life experience and the Cassiopeians about that, about whether it serves anyone to worry about them if you can't actually do anything to help them?
I think it's a two-sided answer. I think if you weren't worried about the people, then that's a problem. I think that
The
shows your
psychopath.
empathy. Yeah, that you actually give. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I was saying back to the war thing. No regular citizen in any country wants to go to war. I mean, I've traveled the world myself, and most people are happy to they want to show you their culture and they want to ask you about your culture. They're very most people across the world are very loving people to other foreign people. That's just been my experience. There's very few people that hate, you know.
Mm.
But with that being said, is when we look at this from a spiritual perspective, as far as our own soul's journey, your soul and its ultimate wisdom put itself in the situation it needed to be in for whatever karma it needed, for whatever life purposes it had wanted to serve. And so we have to have that respect for everybody else, that they not to interrupt anybody else's karma. Now, if somebody's in a bad situation and they're asking you for help and you have the ability to help them, then you help them. But in situations where we really can't do a whole lot, like the Middle East, I feel terrible for the Ukrainians.
Yeah.
My heart breaks for them. When I talk about the Ukraine, I'm talking about the government. I'm not
Yeah.
talking about the people. God bless the
Absolutely.
people of Ukraine. But when the Americans are getting frustrated with Canada right now because of all the money Canada's been obviously stealing from us, we're mad at the government. We're not mad at the Canadian people. We love the Canadian people. They didn't know that that's what the Canada's
They
medical.
never got any of the benefit of it. This is the thing. It's like, yeah,
We
absolutely.
talk about like this country or that country. We're talking about the government, not the people. The videos, and of course, again, is this manipulation? I don't know, but the videos I'm seeing of men being just grabbed off the street in Ukraine, like that, like unnerves me. Like that is so my heart just like breaks for the people. If that is what's happening in the Ukraine, I'm so sorry. Like I wish there was something I could do. And maybe us doing something is talking about it, is saying this is not right from a human perspective, but things have to play out. It's not going to stop overnight.
Yeah.
Things have to play out the way they have to play out. And so it's hard to like, it's almost like this I've been talking a lot with a new course on the Esoteric Academy about this a whole idea about finding balance between comfort and alertness and things
Oh,
you do.
wow.
Like
Yeah.
having that balance between letting things go, but also speaking up and putting down boundaries and saying, as a human being, as Brice, as a human being, I do not accept what is happening to people in some of these countries. I do not, this is horrible. My heart hurts and breaks, but I also have to let that go because there's nothing I personally can do about it. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. And when you were speaking about that, I was just quickly messaging so I got the name right because I don't know. It's been a long week for me, so I'm a bit fuzzled. But you take someone like Djokovic, the tennis player,
Yeah.
Novak Djokovic. Now he was very, very vocal. It's late enough in the video, so I think I can say it about COVID and about not taking the jibby jab. But when you hear his story and watch his life story, he grew up in the Serbian War. It was absolutely incredible what he and his family went through. In terms of the NATO bombings of Yugoslavia, the role of the Western powers. And when you look at how he's used that trauma and built probably just about the strongest mental resilience, looked into alternative healing, the strength of his belief systems he's got. Now, his is obviously a story where he survived, and
Yeah.
a lot of people don't survive. But again, it's like what makes diamonds? It's the heat, it's the pressure. When you look at lavender essential oil, the high altitude lavender is the one with the most potent healing properties because
Yeah.
it's been through the most stress. And the essential oils are basically the plant stress response. And
Yeah.
so it's not nice at the time, but the people that do survive, yes, they will have trauma, but they'll also have got a huge amount of positive skills from it. So it's not an excuse for it, and it's terrible, and we wouldn't wish it on our worst enemies. But equally, for me, I've had to realize, as you say, you can send them love and you can keep being open minded to think, is there anything that we mere mortals can do? But equally, to sit there and not enjoy your own life, which will impact your family and your loved ones and how much you can show up in society, isn't helping them either. So it's finding that balance. But I love the fact that you raise a point that, there's so much shaming and this toxic positivity that, oh, you must never worry about something that you can't control. But if you're a normal souled human, you will. That's
You
part of
will.
nature.
You'll seeing somebody get the one video I saw a few days ago of the guy walking his dog, and a van pulls up and just leaves the dog and just grabs him, and the dog's confused, and the man's trying to struggle, and he was being sent off to fight. And that if you can't watch that a human being and not just want to cry
Yeah.
for the man and the dog, like not just
Yeah.
want to, but what can you do, And just being aware and conscious of what's going on, and you can't take on somebody else's karma though, and you can't. The Cassiopeians laugh at us and say you're stuck in such 3D thinking. There's a bigger picture at play here. And our souls, our higher selves know that. They see the whole span of our lifetimes. And so they're even going back to what we're saying, not even just in the day-to-day newsreels, not knowing the full story. In the bigger picture of our souls cycles here, we still don't know the full story of what's happening. And that's between act. We say that in yoga too, like you with a hemza, which is nonviolence. It's not that you just sit around like as a wall, like a doormat, and people just, no, you stand up for yourself, but you let go of the expectation of the results, because whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And there's many variables into how this all plays out, and a lot of them we're not aware of, but there's still variables. And it's also, you brought up the essential oils. As you're saying that, it's interesting because sometimes that which is the most poisonous is
Yeah.
also the most healing. Like look at castor
Absolutely.
oil. I mean, castor oil in its natural state, the most potent, can kill you.
Yeah.
In our countries, I'm sure UK is the same way. They don't allow that potency that can kill
No.
you. But in India, you just buy it, and they don't warn you because you should know better.
Yeah.
But rub it on your skin. I do castor oil packs all the time, but it's
So do I did one last night. Yeah.
oh my God, I love it. Ladies, if you want a nice flat stomach, just rub that, get that castor oil cap on your belly. It will help.
I do it multiple times a week. It's just fantastic. And but you are right. This is the thing. It's like we're known, people laugh at us in the UK for our safety warnings, and you go to other parts in the world and there's none, but it has got a little bit ridiculous now. It's like they, do not put the washing powder capsule in your mouth.
In your mouth. Maybe we should. That is the one Darwinian theory that I believe in, is survival of the fittest. That's the one. Yeah. If you're stupid enough to put that in your mouth, then
exactly, then off you go. Yeah. Just very quickly, because I want to we want to hear what the audience wants us to discuss moving forward. We've got some ideas. Please let us know what you think about all this. Please, particularly for me, I'd love to hear what works for you when you feel yourself getting in that overwhelm, that fear state. What works for you? But Brice, I wanted to ask you: do the Catherineans believe in karma?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
I'm the jury out, so I'd love a discussion on that.
Yeah.
I'd love to.
We can talk about it next week too and look through. So karma too, it just cause and effect. That's all it is. So it's counterpose, counterpose, it brings you back to a place of neutrality, of balance. So it's like if you drink a bunch of water, the counterpose is then peeing.
Yeah.
Right. So like you can't drink a bunch unless you're super dehydrated. And if you drink a bunch of water and nothing comes out, that might be a different issue. That there might be some other karma going on there. You might want to check that out. But yeah, so we can absolutely talk more about. I would love to, because I think the Western world, I think we have just a vague understanding about karma. Like, oh, you did something bad to me, it's gonna come back to you. And that sometimes is not the way that karma works. It sometimes works different. And sometimes you can course correct your karma before the results of that action comes the way the person wants it to come. So we can totally talk about that.
I would love to, because I've got some, thoughts and perspectives that aren't sort of very popular. So I'd love to have that.
You can bring in the Dharma. There's Dharma as well. So there's Dharma and Karma. There's our two. What we're dealing with now is both Dharma and Karma. So we can talk about those as well and look at the Bhagavad Gita, where this really comes from. And
brilliant. Yeah. So thank you so much for everyone. Thank you so much, Brice. So the links to Esoteric Atlanta will be below. The links to the Esoteric Academy, Brice's and Paula's Academy, which is absolutely fantastic, completely different to mine. Mine's the Catherine Edwards Academy. Take a look at both of them. It's a great way, if you like this content and want more of it, it's a great way that you can support us both. We've both got very different content on there, so take a look. And next week we will be back on Esoteric Atlanta, so put some comments below. What do you want to hear more about?
And we'll see what happens too next week. Who knows? I want to see. We're going to be going through on the Esoteric Academy. We're actually going to be creating a whole new playlist on the Cassiopeians. We're going to start from the very beginning and go through everything. So we'd love to have you guys over there. So you get 7 days of a free trial. Also check out Catherine's as well, because this is what we do for a living outside of YouTube. So
absolutely.
Some use, right, Catherine?
Yeah, completely. All right, take care, everyone. Have a brilliant week.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. And if you feel inspired, please do share with your friends and family. This helps us spread the word and also helps me encourage some exciting new guests to take part in this podcast. And above all, stay curious and stay free.